right. All right, Drew, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
All right. So I'd like to give everybody an idea of your climb. It's essentially your story of how you got to right here.
Okay, so I'm an agency guy. I started my first agency job was while I was still in college. One of my adjunct professors offered me a freelance writing job, and then I got my undergrad. I got my master's degree. The whole time I was in college, I was working for this adjunct professor who was the creative director at Gray Advertising at the time. And then I went to Y&R and worked in a super big agency. And then I moved back to the Midwest, which is where I'm from, and worked for a small boutique agency. And at that point, was in a bad situation work-wise, didn't like my boss, didn't like sort of the ethics of the agency. And so I was the perfect age. I tell people I was the perfect combination of arrogant and ignorant. I was around 30 years old. It didn't even occur to me that I wouldn't be successful if I launched my own agency. So I stepped out and I started my own agency 25 years ago as of 2020. And I still own that agency today. I still run it today. And, knock on wood, after 25 years, it seems to be working. But very quickly, early on into owning the agency, I realized how hard it was, and all the things I didn't know. I was great at the client facing stuff, but the running the business stuff, I didn't have any idea what I was doing. So I found an organization that taught that sort of thing. And that organization actually was the precursor to Agency Management Institute. So fast forward about 10 years and 10, 15 years. And the guy who started that organization came to me and said, I want to retire. I think you're the guy who can take this organization and kind of blow it up and make it something bigger. Do you want to buy it? So I sound like one of those hair replacement commercials, right? Like, I used to be bald, but now I'm not only the owner of the company, but I have hair. So anyway, I bought the organization that had helped me learn how to run my business. And that is today what Agency Management Institute is.
Right on. And then you still also have an agency, right?
Yeah, I still run my agency. Yep.
And what would you say like the division in time is versus the AMI versus your own agency?
Yeah. So the first caveat to that answer is I don't work 40 hours a week. So I work more than that. I'm not a 4-day work week or any of that crap. I don't believe in that. But so it's probably a 20-80 split, but it's probably a 15 hours, 35 or 40 hours split. So I spend more of my time on Agency Management Institute for sure than I do the agency. But part of the reason why that's possible is so remember, my agency is 25 years old.
Mm-hmm.
My average staff tenure is 17 years. So most of
Wow.
my people have been with me for a super long time. And I kind of muck things up when I come back in and try and be helpful. They would say helpful with air quotes, right? So I stick to my knitting in terms of the agency. So I really am working on the business on the agency side for the most part. I have very little interaction with our agency clients anymore. Some strategic work, but I'm mostly on biz dev and marketing and mentoring the team. And then I spend most of my time on the Agency Management Institute side.
So in the truest form, you've become essentially optional, right? As Carl Sagas would say.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think an agency owner, unless you're an absentee owner and you've got a president in place who's running the business, I'm not sure an agency owner should ever be optional. But I certainly am not essential to the day-to-day work, for sure.
Got it. And
Yeah.
why do you think somebody shouldn't be optional? Is it just
I think if you want to be an absentee landowner and basically have somebody else farming your crops and like you pop in twice a year, I think that's certainly an option if you have a president in place who is authorized to make all the decisions, has access to all of the money. Like if they really are running the business like it's their own, I think that's fine. But otherwise, I think for most agency owners, while they may not want to be quagmired in doing the work, and they shouldn't be quagmired in doing the work, their biggest job should be biz dev. I don't think it makes sense for most agency owners, unless you're at the holding company size, for
right?
you to be completely divorced from the work.
So how I am responsible for biz dev at my agency. I have a
Yep.
partner that's responsible for operations. It used to be that's actually what created my the want for us to merge. He's like, I hate this part. I was like, I hate
Right.
that part, and it makes
Right.
sense. Um, what do you do when you see these agency owners that are resistant to biz dev? Because some people just find it at this abhorrent exercise that shouldn't exist.
Well, a couple of things. One, all of the division of labor is easier if you have a partner. And as you know, and as anybody knows who has a partner, there are some awesome things about having a partner, and there are some not so awesome things about having a
I've
partner.
had bad partners too.
Yep, right. And so a lot of that is it's like a good marriage, right? When you
Mhm.
find the right partner, it really works. When you align with the wrong partner, it may work for a while, but then it becomes a problem. But if you're a solo owner and you're not doing biz dev, then the question is who is, right? So many agencies will try and hire a biz dev person. I would say 1 out of 50 pays for themselves, and the other 49 are an expense against the agency that does not have ROI. The reality is, for most small to mid-sized agency owners, number one, they sell backwards, and so they make it harder on themselves, and that's why they don't like it. But number two, there's no one better in the shop to sell the agency's skills and services than the agency owner. They're the ones that can have the most complex business conversations with prospects. They're the ones that can relate to the challenges that the person across the table is experiencing at a different level than some, young kid or sales guy who doesn't really understand business or the agency services. So I think it's difficult to find a great salesperson. I think it's easier to find a great salesperson if what you sell is more commoditized. So when I look, we work with about 300 agencies a year. And when I say we we see more than that in terms of like at our workshops and things like that. But I'm talking about like I see their full financials and I really know their business. The agencies that have successfully hired an outside business person to come in as an employee and sell are the agencies that sell something that's easy to understand. Digital media buying, PPC, SEO, those kind of things, easier for someone to sell than what we think of as traditional agency services like, strategy and creative and lead generation and things like that that require both a great understanding of marketing and a great understanding of business.
Got it. And do you where do you see anybody hiring good business development people? Like, is there a platform or other than you know what
Like
I'm saying? Like,
like where are they finding them?
yeah, like where are they finding them from different industries? Is it better to train them up themselves?
You know what? It's a mix of things. So I have some agencies that have found an AE that has been unusually good at upselling.
Hmm.
That they have converted into a salesperson. So, for example, in the agency I'm thinking about, this is a person who had been at the agency for almost a decade. So he really understood what the agency did, the kind of work they did. He could tell all the stories, the success stories, the case studies, but he was a great salesperson inside an AE role. So they freed him of his day-to-day duties of account service and put him on the new business trail. And he's doing a great job because he's almost owner like he's sort of owner light, if you will,
Hmm.
right? I've seen other agencies that have hired traditional salespeople. And again, this is why it's easier for them to sell something simpler because they can get up to speed faster. When you can really understand, look, you put it 4 quarters in the jukebox and you get 3 songs. When you understand that, whether it's media buying or it's PPC or whatever it is, that's easier to sell because you don't have to have the whole depth and breadth of what an agency owner has. So I don't know that there's a magic like garden where you can go and pluck a good salesperson. But you might first start looking inside your own organization and see if you've got somebody who is historically really able to help grow a certain client or a book of business. And otherwise, I think somebody who's a good salesperson, who's willing to take the rejection, who is tenacious and is very curious and willing to learn the agency business is as good as any, but the odds are not in your favor.
Something you said there resonates, and it's something I tell people that work in sales and business development is sales is a series of conversations, and those conversations, most importantly, have to be stories that resonate.
Right.
So I think that's interesting that you also, yeah, this guy had the stories and the history, and I
Right.
think that's a takeaway, for myself. Like, okay, well, what are those stories? Whether they're case studies or whatnot, those are the things that really need to be taught. I've said that, but I didn't really digest it until you said what you said.
Well, I think the key to sales is the best salespeople don't talk that much, right? They
Hmm.
ask great questions, they listen, and what you want them to hear is when they hear a problem that the prospect is talking about or a challenge they're facing, you want them to be able to sort of go in their mental Rolodex and go, oh, well, you know what? We had a client who had a problem just like that. And here's what we tried with them. And then, and this is the part that a lot of salespeople don't get. And then you give it away. You go, you know what? You should try that for yourself and blah, 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 blah. You don't have to and then say, do you want us to do that for you? Right. So sales is a series of conversations, but I find the best salespeople are the ones who appear to not actually be selling, who
Hmm.
actually appear to be helping. And in providing that help, all of a sudden the prospect is like, you know what, this person has helped me 3 times now. I bet they could help me more if I actually engaged with them on a more formal basis or on an ongoing basis. The best sales are when you don't trigger the sale, but your prospect does.
Do you recommend letting them know like the boundaries and telling this is how our sales process works, or do you prefer a more organic approach?
Tell me more about that. This is the boundaries of our sales process.
So,
Like I'm only willing to give you 3 meetings and then I'm going to say goodbye.
no, not necessarily. Just saying this is how we sell. So that's something I always recommend. Where when we engage with a prospect, I tell them, hey, thank you so much, but this is how our sales process works, right? We're going to have anywhere from 2 to 3 meetings, and then in those 2 to 3 meetings, we're going to figure out what it is that we can help you with. And then and it's either going to be in the second or the third meeting, we're going to show you an outline of what the price looks like. We're not going to give you a formal proposal. And then if you agree to what that outline looks like, and we're at that point, we'll go ahead and create a formal proposal. How does that sound to you? And they're like, okay, that sounds good. And then we go ahead and we move through that process. If they,
Yeah, I think that's fine, but I think that's deeper into the process, right? I think a lot of times, and again, in my mind, this is how we make it harder on ourselves. In my mind, you can be helpful in so many ways, even with people that you don't know are out there, that you can actually skip some of those processes and get right to them raising their hand and saying, hey, I want to buy something. But yes, I think if you're in the more formal part, the tail end of the sales process, yeah, I think it helps for you to say, look, here's typically how this works with us. We can certainly modify it if you want to, but this
yep.
is typically how we process through this. Now that you've said you think you want to buy something from us. But I think if you have that conversation too early, then I think you spook them and they take off.
Okay. So I think, yeah, I formulated that. My understanding was a little bit different. You're talking about like the true prospecting. You're out there assisting people, trying to build and show value based on the relationship.
Yeah. And again, at some point in time, they're going to raise their hand and say, I want to buy something from you. You know what? You've been so helpful. Now, tell me more about what you do and how you help clients. And I think that's when you go into what you just talked about, which is we would be happy to sit down with you. And you know what? For the first couple of meetings, we're just going to talk about what's going on in your business and what you think you need. And then we're going to be really honest with you about where we can help and where we can't help. And if that sounds valuable to you, we can give you at least a ballpark of what that's going to cost. And if that seems reasonable, we can move to something more formal if you want us to.
And then with your process, what are some of the ways that you recommend agencies help to show value in those other preliminary conversations?
Yeah. So I wrote a book that came out, I was going to say last January. I swear this year feels like it's about 18 months long. So in January of this year, we're recording this in November. In January of this year, a book came out that I wrote called Sell with Authority. And I believe that is how agencies should sell today. Is I believe you need to take a position of authority. Some people might call it expertise or thought leadership or whatever, but you need to own a plot of land where you say, you know what, we know this better than anybody else. And you start putting out content that, and there's a whole methodology around it, which I will not get into now, but you start putting out content. I think of it as, imagine my prospector deer and they live out in the forest right by my house. And so I want to start putting delicious deer food at the very edge of the forest, and they start eating that. And I keep moving the food closer and closer into my yard. And over time, they are like, I can count on this guy to feed me and my family every day. So I'm going to keep coming back and I'm going to keep eating. And over time, I'm going to start trusting him that he's not going to, come running at me or yell or bang a pot or pan at me. So I'm going to come deeper into his yard and keep eating his food. And pretty soon they're ready to eat out of your hand. And I think that's the way we should draw the right fit prospects to us, as opposed to us going out and just talking to strangers who we have no idea if they have any interest in hiring an agency or not, or if their brother-in-law owns an agency. But by attracting right fit clients to us, a subset of them will raise their hand and say, you know what, you've been feeding me for so long. Today's the day I need to hire an agency. And of course, you're on my list because you've already been super helpful to me all this time. So why wouldn't I want to engage with you further? So in essence, when we go out and sell, and we kind of gear up and we put together a prospect list, and that's certainly part of our process too, but it's a different part of the process. What we do is we demonstrate to the audience, our prospects, that we're interested in having them hire us. And I believe we have to be interesting first before they're interested. That's the key. It's not us being interested. Of course, we're interested. We want them to hire us. The key is us being interesting so that they get interested. And then all of a sudden, that's how the relationship is formed.
And with the process of becoming an authority, it's obviously a lot of content, whether that's video, podcast or written. What percentage of somebody that's in charge of business development, whether it's an agency owner or not, would you recommend of their time that they write and create content?
Yeah. So the methodology we teach is really you need to create one piece of cornerstone content. So one big meaty piece. Write a book, have a podcast, do an annual piece of research, like something that is large enough that you can slice and dice it for a year and have all kinds of content that you can share through your social channels and all of that. So I think one of the mistakes, one of the reasons why more agencies don't lock into a content strategy is because it's overwhelming. It's like, I don't have time to do a video every day and I don't have time to do all this. And I think that's not the methodology we should do. I think it's about creating this cornerstone content that we can basically break up into all of these cobblestones that we can spread out over the year, and people start walking on the cobblestones to get to the cornerstone. And then they find that cornerstone, and that's something they can consume on an ongoing basis. So I think an agency owner, assuming they are the primary salesperson in their agency, I think an agency owner should carve 50% of their time for biz dev. And that's everything from content creation to talking to prospects to answering RFPs or whatever. And that does not mean, by the way, that the agency owner should do all of that work, but the agency owner is responsible for that work being done. A good agency owner is going to tap into the talents of their team to help them get all of that stuff done, whatever that may be.
So, do you all the content that you write, your blog posts and everything that you produce, are you actually writing those words, or are there other people that you're outlining and they're fleshing it out?
Yeah, I would be the Abby Normal in this scenario, because I'm a writer by trade. And so it's easier for me to bang out a blog post or to record a video that is off the cuff, than have somebody else script it and me do it. But I think for many agencies, the agency owner will create or co-create the cornerstone piece, and then their team will break up all of it into the cobblestone. So we do have people on our team, for example, that take parts of our research that we do every year or parts of the book that I was just mentioning, and they will grab snippets out of it and make graphics and quote cards and all of that. So they're taking my words and they are just repurposing them in a smaller bite-sized format. But I don't think that has to be the way it is. So if you're an agency owner, in the book we talk about, are you a better writer or are you a better talker? I think part of it is some people are more comfortable in this impromptu conversational style like what you and I are doing now. So
Mhm.
maybe they'd be a great podcaster or they'd be great at having a video series. Other people like to be able to edit, right? And don't want to be off the cuff. So they might be a prolific blogger, or they might write a book or a bunch of ebooks or whatever. So I think you have to play to your strengths as well and your comfort level. But I think you also have to get out of your own way. I'll have a lot of agency owners say to me, well, I don't know what to say, or I don't know anything everybody else doesn't know. I think you have to step out of your own discomfort and recognize that you do know a lot that we take for granted we know because we talk about it every day, but that doesn't mean our prospects wouldn't value it. And it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be the Mona Lisa of factoids or books or whatever. It just has to be valuable and useful. That's all.
Which is so contrarian to the work that we do for our clients, because it has to be as close to perfect as possible for them to approve it and then based on their view work for their audience, right? So it's this very flipped model when we're told to be content creators in a lot of ways. Speaking from myself personally, because I can be one of those people that will just look at a blog post that I've written and rewrite it like 30 times.
Yeah, well, I think perfection paralyzes us, right?
Yeah.
So I think this is why it takes an agency 3 years to get their website revised, because we get into this analysis paralysis as opposed to recognizing that in today's world everything is iterative, right? Everything can be improved, but getting it out there and this is why one of the reasons why deadlines are so helpful. So on the agency owner side of my world, I have written a marketing column, a weekly marketing column for my state's business journal for the last 17 years.
Wow.
So I got to get that thing in every week, right? I don't have time to rewrite it a million times. And in the beginning, I sweated out every word. And I was so concerned that it wasn't going to be mind blowing for the entire audience. And then I realized that it's okay for me to remind them of something they already know, but they're just not doing. It's okay for me to take just a nugget of something and give them a different perspective. And when we look at our own thought leadership that way, and we realize that we're going to be judged by its accumulative value, not on whether one blog post changed a prospect's world, then we can get on a calendar and we can get on a schedule and we can nip away at being helpful every time. And then what they do is they step back and they go, my gosh, every time I hear from so and so, there's a nugget of something I can take away. That's all really we have to do to be of value to our prospects and our clients.
So you appear to be skilled in both speaking as well as writing. Did you? It sounds like you're a trained writer, copywriter, based
Yeah.
on your experience. On the speaking side, did you take training for that?
I've certainly taken some courses on public speaking, and I've certainly been taking some coaching on presenting from a stage. I'm fortunate that I have been given both the ability to write pretty well, and obviously over the years I've honed that skill. It was a God-given talent that I've tried to improve upon with practice and coaching. But I've always had the gift of the gab, which I attribute to my mother, my Italian mother, right? So and I'm comfortable unlike most people, like I know a lot of people think of speaking as like the most horrifying thing in the world. I like stepping on a stage and talking to a big crowd, but I think it's because I perceive it as it's my opportunity to be helpful. And so that takes a lot of pressure off of me. I don't have to, my performance doesn't have to be perfect. My slide deck doesn't have to be the most beautiful slide deck they've ever seen. I just have to help them do their job better. And if I do that, I'm going to get pretty good marks And they're going to say, oh, if Drew's speaking at the conference next year, I want to go see him, not because he's the most eloquent speaker in the world, but because he said something that I could take away and do something with. So all of a sudden, it takes a lot of the performance pressure off.
So you also mentioned the authority side. I want to jump back to there. And then to be an authority, you need a topic to talk about, right? And some
Right.
people might say this is a specialty or this is a niche or niche, depending on where you are in the country. Um, do you help people with what you do select that, to find their niche?
Yeah. Yeah, we
How do you
do.
go about that?
You know what? So I think there are three things that you have to be an authority. Number one, you have to have a specialty or a niche, and that specialty or niche does not have to be a vertical. Everybody's like, I don't want to only work in travel and tourism. I want to do other things. So it can be a vertical, and for many agencies, that's what it is. It can be an audience, like, you know what, we know how to reach, we understand the psychology of, we know how to reach and influence millennial moms better than anybody else. So it can be an audience. It can be a methodology. So we have one agency, for example, who literally has trademarked the term challenger brand marketing.
Mm,
And what they say is our niche is we help the little guys take on the market leaders in their category. Or it could be for in some cases, and I think this is a risky position, but you can say, you know what, we are the Amazon marketplace agency. We help with that. That niche is short lived, right? Because 5 years ago, you could, or 10 years ago, you could have said you were the PPC agency. And there were a lot of agencies that couldn't compete with that. But now most agencies can compete with that. And while today it's difficult to find an agency that really has honed in their ability to work in the Amazon space, pretty soon a lot of agencies will do that. So I think the first three are more evergreen than the deliverable niche. But yeah, you have to have a niche. Then I think you have to have a point of view. You have to overlay that point of view on top of the niche. So, for example, at AMI, our niche is we work with small to mid-size, independently owned agencies. That's our audience. Our point of view that we lay over that is most agency owners are accidental business owners. They're awesome at the client-facing stuff, but the running the business of their business is not what they went to school for, and they don't know the best practices, the financial metrics, the dashboard things they should be looking at. And it's our job to teach them how to run their business better so they make more money and they get to keep more of the money they make. So that's our point of view that we lay over the niche. So it's that 1-2 punch. And then the third element that makes you an authority is you have to be a consistent and generous teacher, which means that you put content out there without also holding your hand out and saying, by the way, I just gave you all that free information, so send me some money by buying my thing, right? So when you do those three things, yes, you're an authority. So back to answering your question, which is how do you define your niche? Most agencies make this much harder than they need to. There really is a series of questions you can ask yourself. Most agencies have a niche baked into their business already. If they start looking at the work they've done, the case studies they're most proud of, the stories they tell around successes they've delivered for clients, they have a niche. They just don't have the courage to claim it and say to the world, this is who we serve. So it's not so much about finding it, it really is about having the courage to own it.
mm, got it. Can you give me an example of one of the questions that they should ask themselves?
Sure. You know, would we have case studies to prove that we have a depth of expertise in this? Would we be happy to serve this niche, whatever it is, to have this specialty for the next decade? Like if I'm all about the millennial moms, am I going to be happy doing that and talking about that and looking for clients who care about that for the next decade? Is this a group of people? Could I identify a group of prospects by either being able to buy a list or knowing what trade show or conference they go to? Like, do they gather in some way, either on a list or physically do they gather in some place where I know basically where my hunting ground is? Another one is this an audience that would have between 500 and I would say 5,000 prospects? Because you don't need more than that, really. Because for an agency, one of the other things that we teach is that you should not, let me back up. When you have a position, a niche, this is about who you go after. It doesn't mean if somebody walks in your door through a referral or something else and they don't fit the niche, but they have a big bag of money and you believe you can help them, sure, take them as a client. That's fine. This is about your outbound efforts, right? So this is what your website's going to say about you. This is what your outbound marketing is going to say about you. This is what your content is going to say. But that doesn't mean you have to turn down other work. Someday, 5 years from now, when you are so well known in that niche, you may choose to turn down that other work, but you don't. This is evolutionary, not revolutionary, right? So anyway, if you only target prospects that are going to be about 10% of your AGI, so you're not going after a bunch of little minnows, you're going after some good sized fish, right? All you need is two a year. If you got 20% of your AGI year over year in new business and you kept most of your current clients, you would double in size in 3 or 4 years. That's plenty of growth for any agency to manage. So it's not like you have to go out and get 5,000 new clients. I think sometimes we get caught up in, oh my gosh, that's such a narrow niche. How can we make money doing that? I'm telling you, some of the agencies we work with have the tiniest little niches in the world, and they're making bank by doing that because they can charge a premium, their sales cycle is shorter, and those clients stay with them forever because they are the specialist. So why would you go to a generalist after you've been with a specialist?
Right. Well put. Based on working with all of these agencies that you have over the last year, you published your book in January, you're continually writing your newsletter, and I know you do one-on-ones, you do coaching. What is the general consensus based on what's going on right now? How are agencies taking that?
Yeah, it's interesting. So a lot of agencies got knocked to their knees in March and April. Clients froze budgets, clients went away. But for the most part, and again, I can look at agencies in a broader scope, but what I can tell you by fact are the agencies whose financials I've seen. Most of our agencies made good decisions in the spring in terms of if they had to right size staff, if they're in the U.S. and they got the PPP loan, if they had to trim back in other places expenses. Most agencies in my world anyway, at worst, are going to finish flat in terms of their 2019 and 2020 comparisons. And several of them are going to show growth of 10 to 20%. So most agencies have recovered incredibly well. The specialists have recovered better than the generalists because CMOs are freaked out by everything that's happened, by the recession. So they're looking for their best bet in terms of agency partners to help them climb out of what they lost in terms of sales this spring or whatever it is. So who are they going to go to? They're going to go to a specialist. So those specialists, even specialists in the travel and tourism industry, are recovering better than the generalists. But most agencies overall actually are faring pretty well. So I would say maybe 10% of all agencies that I come into contact with, whether they're my agencies or not, are going to have a lower AGI at the end of 2020 than they did in 2019. But the rest are going to be flat or a notch or two above. So most agencies are doing well.
That's good to hear. So it's not as bleak as some have made it sound. Have
No,
you seen agents, certain types of agencies better than others? Like, are creative agencies, better or taking a worse hit? Or is it, more the commodity, whether it's paid search or email marketing, do better? Have you seen anything based on certain types that would be revealing?
the ones who've taken the hit the hardest and have been slowest to recover are the media planning and buying agencies, especially if they did a lot of traditional. So the good news is for most small to mid-sized agencies, we are jacks of all trades for clients, and we're not, unlike the big holding companies that have Coca-Cola or Nike as clients who spend millions of dollars in media. Those agencies, as we've all watched in the news, they've let go of a third to 50% of their staff, where the smaller guys have been able to pivot much faster. And obviously the agencies that have a lot of digital prowess, whether it's digital media buying or email or lead gen or PPC, they're doing great because when everybody got locked down and when people sort of killed their traditional media budgets or their outdoor media budgets, everybody poured money into digital solutions. So those agencies obviously recovered well. Agencies that have clients that have benefited from the pandemic, like if you were a specialist in grocery food chains or certain food types, or certain kinds of entertainment, e-commerce agencies. Obviously, all of them are having banner years because their clients have been pouring as much gas on the fire as they can because there's so much demand.
What do you see as so happy to that, but what do you see as the future holds for agencies based on AI technology and a lot of these new things that are being developed?
I think, and I've always said this, I think the one thing that can't be replaced by any technology is the strategic thinking and that outside perspective that agencies bring to their clients. And so I think agencies that for a lot of agencies, they've been giving away their thinking to sell their commoditized deliverables. I think that's a methodology that is a quick road to erosion, right? So as tools and freelancers and everybody else commoditize the deliverable side of our business, what no one has figured out a way to do less expensively. And by the way, the consulting companies, the McKinseys of the world, are charging $400 for what we do. That's the thing I think that we can still sell with confidence, that we do understand not only marketing, but our client's business. And we can be helpful bringing those things together to help our clients achieve our goals. Whether they hire us to do the stuff or not, that's the part that it feels like things get a little wobbly sometimes, and AI may take some of that away. But honestly, our clients don't want to learn about how all those tools work. They want someone else to drive the car for them. So if we figure out how to implement some AI tools into what we do and do better analytics around all of that, we become more valuable, not less valuable.
So it's essentially just being the brain and quarterback as much as possible
Yeah,
and not trying to devalue what you do, race to the bottom. Like, yeah, a lot of, freelancers and a lot of solopreneurs jump into that space and
right.
they could take some hits. Um, I know you published a large study based on I believe it was in June, right? You had this study. What were some of the biggest findings in that? Speaking to all these agencies, and also if you could explain what that study looks like
Yeah.
from a context standpoint.
Yeah, so since 2014, every year we do some primary research. We do one research study a year, which we put under the umbrella of the Agency Edge research series. So every year we partner with a company called Audience Audit, which is a research firm, and we identify one thing we want to know more about that we think agency owners are hungry to learn about. So, for example, in the past, we've looked at how and why agencies get hired and fired. We've looked at how clients feel about their account executives or account managers and what they want from them. We looked last year, our study was all about how clients decide when they're going to keep work in-house and when they're going to put it out to their agencies. So this year, our intention in December of 2019, our plan was that we were going to go out into the field and we were going to ask clients how they were feeling about the pending recession that we were all waiting for and how that was going to influence their agency relationship, their spending, all of that. Well, we were just getting ready to go into the field in late February when we realized the pandemic was coming. So we waited, and then we rewrote the survey to say, okay, the recession is here and we've got COVID and all of that. How are you now feeling about spending, your agency relationship, and all of that? And we went into the field the last week of June through mid-July. So right after the second quarter, which was for the US, really the worst economic quarter other than the Great Depression. And so we talked to over 1,000 respondents. Their budgets ranged up to 500 million in terms of revenue and up to 200 million in marketing spend, all the way down to like a quarter million in marketing spend. So a broad range. And honestly, when we went out into the field, I thought this is not going to be fun news to report back. This is going to be abysmal. And the respondents surprised me. 70% of them are like, you know what? Every 10 years or so, we go through an economic bump. Yes, there's a pandemic, but economically, this is no different than anything else. And half of the people who responded that way were like, actually, we're going to up our spend because everyone else is being quiet. And we know that there's market share to be taken when other people lay low during a recession. We're going to ramp up. And the other part of the people who were positive about it, if you will, were like, you know what, we're the steady eddies. We're going to put our heads down. We're going to keep working the way we've been working. And we know that we will muscle through this like we have muscled through all the other economic downturns. And there was about 30% of the respondents who were frankly freaking out. And they were mostly people who had really been devastated in the Great Recession. So a decade ago, they either lost their job, their company might have gone out of business. They had a lot of personal pain around the recession in '07 and '08. And they were carrying all of that baggage into this recession. But for me, the great news was that the vast majority, 70%, and all of these people are actively working with agencies right now. 70% of the respondents were like, you know what? We're going to keep spending. We may change where we spend our dollars, but we're not going to change the fact that we're marketing. We're not going to change the fact that there's opportunity there that we want to take advantage of. And we're not going to change the fact that we know we need agencies to help us do that. So actually, the results were really much better news than I had hoped.
What in the last third that took it the hardest? Were there questions that related to them laying off people? I mean, was there any data that was produced that looked like that?
Yeah. So first of all, I'll send you a link, but folks can download the executive summary and look at a lot of the data for free. So I'll make sure you have a link for that for the show
Appreciate
notes.
that.
But yeah, so the way that the way these folks were responding was they were cutting their budget in terms of spend, whether it was their internal spend or spend with agencies. They may be reducing their own staff size. Um, they were really kind of curling up into a ball and hoping the storm passed them by. But they were fearful, and they were ratcheting everything back. Whereas the other two groups were really either saying, you know, we're not going to make a lot of changes in terms of our dollar amount of spend. We might pivot. And then the largest group, actually, 40% of the respondents said, actually, if our agencies bring us some big, bold ideas, we're ready to spend even more money this year because we know our competitors are going dark. And so there's not as much noise in the marketplace. So we can really take advantage, which, as you and I know, actually, there's data from every recession since the dawn of time that shows that when brands go dark during an economic recession or depression, they lose market share that oftentimes they can never recover. So there's a lot of data around that agencies, I think, can use to help clients recognize that they should stay out there and they should keep telling their story.
Yeah, double down. That's something. I mean, if everybody's going to stop spending, why would you do the same? I
Right,
completely
right,
agree.
right.
How involved should the agency owner be in their day-to-day marketing?
In their own day-to-day marketing,
Yeah.
I think they should own it, which again doesn't mean they should do it, but I think they should be the quarterback of that team. I think that's actually, first of all, in most small to mid-sized agencies, the agency draws its values and its vision from the owner. So I think they need to bake that into their own marketing. And so they certainly need to have their thumbprint on it, if nothing else. I don't think most agency owners are great at execution anymore. We, as a general rule, are not great detail people. So I think having other people on your team at least be your safety net if you're going to execute. or execute for you, I think makes the most sense. But I think you should own the plan and you should own the outcomes, because again, marketing is going to eventually trickle from the sales funnel into sales, which the agency owner should own in most cases. So I think they are part of the same ecosystem. So I think the owner has to be involved in all of it. And again, if you're following our methodology of creating this cornerstone content, that needs to be, whether you pay a ghostwriter to write your book or you write your book, that needs to be done under your name, because the worst thing in the world an agency owner can do, and I've seen this happen a couple of times, is they put the spotlight on a lieutenant inside the agency. So let's say the agency owner is an introvert, they're kind of shy and they don't want to be out in public and they don't want to speak at a conference and they don't want to be on a podcast or whatever it is. So they have this trusted lieutenant that they say, you know what, you be the face of the agency, you write the book or you have the podcast. The problem is when that person gets a little bit of fame for whatever your niche is, they are prime for the poaching, and some other agency hires them away from you. And now all of a sudden that fame and that expertise and that position of authority goes right to that other agency with that person. So unless that person owns part of the agency and is sort of locked in with some golden handcuffs, I would not put the spotlight on an employee. It really does have to be on the owner. Whether you actually do the work or not is a different discussion.
I think that's great advice, and I've seen that too. It
Mm,
wasn't in the agency space, it was in the platform space, and I was like, I thought that guy was an owner when he left because I read all of his posts, and it
right.
turns out no, he had nothing to do with the equity side of things.
Right. And so all of a sudden now, I mean, think of what a coup that is to hire that person
Yeah.
and to get all that authority and sort of fame with them. That's super dangerous.
What do you also get into, and that maybe you've covered this on some of your surveys, the percentage of marketing that agencies, or this percentage that agencies should be spending on their own marketing?
In terms of dollars or
Yeah.
time, or yeah.
Dollars, yeah.
Yeah, you know what? I think it's a scarcity issue. So, there's no company on the planet who should be able to do better marketing for themselves than an agency. I mean, literally, that's what we get paid to do for everybody else in our world. So, if it really doesn't have to cost much of anything other than if you're going to do some paid media behind it, it shouldn't cost you much more than people's time. But if people's time is scarce and so you have to hire someone to do something, or you don't have a talent inside let's say you decide you want to write a book about your niche or your specialty, and that's just not your gift, and you have no one on your team that's their gift, then yeah, I guess you're gonna have to pay for it. But for most agencies, it's really a much greater expenditure in terms of time than it is money. And again, if you're going after somebody who's 10% of your AGI, part of it is do the work that you would do for a client. What is the lifetime value of a client for you? How long do you typically keep a client? How long do you keep a client that is like in your sweet spot? Like, because again, you're trying to attract the best fit customers or clients for yourself, not any Tom, Dick, and Harry or, butcher, baker, and candlestick maker, but somebody who really aligns with your niche. How long do you keep that kind of client? Well, if they're worth a couple $100,000 to you a year, and you keep them for 5 years, you can probably spend a pretty penny to get one.
It's just so crazy to me that agencies are so terrible at marketing themselves.
Well, you know what? The problem is it's not that they don't have the skills, it's that they do not allow themselves the time. So it is the whole stupid cobbler's children have no shoes thing, which I hate. Um, because it's just an excuse. They absolutely can do it. They do it every day for their clients. They get paid good money to do it. So they are absolutely skilled. It is simply that they don't make it a priority. And until it's a priority, it's not going to happen. And so when it doesn't happen, then you have to count on referrals or walk-ins. And basically that's whatever someone serves you, you have to eat. And that's a pretty unsatisfying way to grow your business, in my opinion.
What percentage of the agencies would you say you work with that are all referral based until they go through your program?
Yeah. So remind me, I'll also send you, we have a growth chart. 70% of all agencies live and breathe on referrals and their own network, and really don't have a biz dev program that runs consistently and well. And so they also get stuck that if you haven't grown in the last couple of years, either by AGI or staff size or however you're measuring growth, if you're stuck at a certain size, I guarantee you it's because your biz dev program has not gotten more sophisticated.
And a sophisticated biz dev program would look like what exactly?
It would be something that happens. So what happens in most agencies is what I call feast or famine biz dev, which is there is no ongoing, like you might put out a social post now and then, and your monthly newsletter goes out 5 times a year. Like, you sort of kind of half perform your marketing, to our earlier conversation, until you get the warning sign that one of your big clients is going to go away or you get fired. And then it's all hands on deck. And there's this flurry of activity until you land a client or two. And then you're so busy onboarding those clients that all your biz dev efforts go right back out the window. So you can't sustain that flurry of activity, that frenetic flurry of activity on an ongoing basis. But you could sustain something that happens, this happens on every Monday, this happens every Wednesday, this happens once a month, like that there's a program to it, that you have deadlines and you consistently hit those deadlines. That's what most agencies don't evolve to. They just do this feast or famine frenetic activity, and then it all sort of dies away. And
Yeah, the
and
dear
that's
stars.
yeah, right. Yeah, it's
What
it's
about the
unfortunate.
didn't mean to get you out there. Apologize. The It seems like a lot of agencies just use the same playbook in the way that they market themselves. It's essentially something that HubSpot's created, and it's like this battle for sameness. They're all doing the same thing,
Right.
offering the same thing. Are you seeing that continue or dwindle?
I think the more
Or
clear
do you
you
even believe
are,
it exists? Sorry,
I,
I framed a question that, or do you even believe what I
I
just said
I
exists?
think there's a sea of sameness for sure.
Okay.
And I think it's easier to fall into that when you don't have a unique story to tell. When when you are really a subject matter expert, when you are an authority, then if you want to use the HubSpot model or somebody else's model, more power to you, because the content is unique enough that it stands out. But I think, for example, I guarantee you on the day that Pantone announces their color of the year, there are 27,000 agency blog posts that talk about the color of the year. Meaningless, pablum, not helpful, right? No one cares that it's whatever green it is. Like that, I think, is the sea of sameness. Now, if you're writing about your subject matter expertise and you actually do have a depth of expertise that is of value to your audience, then the way you get that information out, I'm betting, is going to be tailored to how your audience consumes content. So automatically, it's unique in terms of both the content and the delivery model. But most agencies don't discipline themselves enough. And it really is just being disciplined, right? It's just about having a discipline of, this is a priority for us. We're going to treat it like any other kind of client. And if we say it's going to go out on Wednesday, it goes out on Wednesday. I don't care if that means everyone's up till 2 a.m. on Tuesday, but it goes out on Wednesday because we've made that commitment. We do it for clients all the time. So there is no reason other than our own lack of discipline that we don't do it for ourselves.
It's like a personal integrity conversation.
Kind of. I mean, it really is. And people are like, oh, well, we're so busy, sorry, blah, 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 blah. You make time for the stuff that matters. So if this doesn't matter to you and you're content with your agency being how it is, and you're content having a guerrilla client that is 55 or 60% of your AGI, and if they walk away, you have to lay off half of your staff, then don't change. That's okay. It's your business. You get to do it how you want to. I do believe there is a better way.
Agreed. Or they're there for a reason.
Right, right.
So with all the deadlines and things that we have to make sure that we meet, it's been a tough year. Would you recommend somebody dealt with burnout before, or how they deal with burnout now? What are your tips for dealing with burnout?
Yeah, this has been such a year. I was just talking with an agency owner this morning, and he was just saying, I have no gas left in the tank. I'm out. And I think for a lot of us, the way we kind of refilled our bucket has been taken away from us. For me, a lot of how I refueled my own tank was travel. And that's been pretty tough this year, right? And spending time with, I love being in with big groups of agency owners. I haven't been able to do that. So I think part of it starts with, and this is not unique to agency owners. I think we all have to do this as human beings. I think you have to understand what saps your energy and what refuels your energy. And you need to be very carefully monitoring how low you allow the tank to go. So it's no different than when we drive our car. All of us, I have friends that the minute their gas tank gets to halfway empty, they're running to the gas station. I have other people who routinely run out of gas because they let it go to, too far down. We have to monitor our own gas tank. And we have to know what refuels us. And, I think for a lot of people, it is getting some fresh air, it's getting outside. I think it's getting some physical activity where we are not used to being so sedentary, so stuck in our homes or in at least a small geography that we've been able to explore. So I think part of it is that. I think it is being mindful of the people that drain you versus the people that kind of refill you. I think for a lot of agency owners, they have found outlets for their creativity that are different. So I have a lot of agency owners that are becoming great cooks or doing more work in their workshop or whatever it is. But for every one of us, it's going to be different. For me, it's been a combination of making sure that I'm not too isolated, that I have more human contact in however I can do that. So I've got 3 or 4 friends. So I like single malt scotches. And so I have 3 or 4 friends, and we will once a month pick a new scotch that we've never tried before. We all go out and find it somewhere, whether we order it online or we get it from our local grocery store or liquor store. And then we get on a FaceTime call and we do a scotch tasting. And then we, shoot the breeze for an hour. And so it's a mix of something that's fun and interesting and something to look forward to and something of interest that we share, but it's really just about having human contact. So I think we have to be very mindful. Actually, I hope this is one of the things that lasts after the pandemic is gone, is I think we have to be better. Agency owners are used to burning the candle at both ends and the middle. And so I think the pandemic has forced us to be more mindful of our own sort of taking care of ourselves and making sure that we don't let the tank get too empty. So I actually hope that practice lasts long after the pandemic is gone and we're back to our frenetic schedules and hopping on planes every day and all the stuff that we, did a year ago.
Do you keep a list of the things that zap your energy? Like,
Like, do
how
I
do
have
you
a
go about and
like
people
do
are
I
like,
have a
"I don't
physical
wanna talk
list?
to that guy anymore."
Yeah.
Yeah, like, what does that look like?
Yeah, it's more of a mental list, like and it's probably not a certain person, but it's probably a certain type of person. Like for me, somebody who is always I call them Eeyores, is always an Eeyore person. Like, oh my God, the world is ending, and no matter who gets elected, we're all going to be homeless, and no one's going to have food. Like that lack of that energy just drives me insane. So there are certain people in my world that are Eeyores, and I know that I cannot do more than one Eeyore a day. I just can't do it, right? And there are other people who are Tiggers. So clearly I'm a Disney guy. They are always happy and bouncy and they see the world in a very different way. I'll take all the Tiggers I can get in my day to sort of help me balance out the Eeyore. So I don't have a list of people, but I sure as heck know who they are. I've categorized them properly. And if anyone's listening, no, I will not tell you. If you're an Eeyore, right? I will not tell you. So I think it's more of that, right? And I also think it's like things like getting good sleep and getting family time and you know I'm a huge I firmly believe you should start every day, and this has nothing to do with the pandemic, sort of pausing and whatever your faith path is or whatever, just being grateful and recognizing 1 or 2 things today that I should be grateful for. That for me sort of sets the tone for the day. And I think a lot of people would benefit from starting their day recognizing that regardless of how tough it is, and I think a lot of people have gone through a lot of horrendous things in this past year, no matter how tough it is, there is some bright light in your day, and you have to acknowledge that.
How do you feel about meditation?
I think it's great. I have tried it more times than I can tell you, and I fall asleep. So I'm doing it wrong. But I know a lot of people, a lot of agency owners do it. They do yoga, they do meditation, and they find great value in that. I wish I could do it. I've tried it, but like I said, I literally just fall asleep. I'm guessing that there's nothing interesting enough in my head to keep me awake when there's no outside stimulus. So I just doze right off. So
You're just so at peace.
I don't know what it is. I just assume that I'm boring, but I, I, I believe it's very powerful for many people. I have yet to figure out how to use it for myself.
Yeah, and it's something that I would shoot down as just like it was a trend, and then I'd try it, and it's something that's it's worked out for me. And yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's just breathing and counting. So, but yeah, sometimes I'll fall asleep as well. But I was the same way. I would just literally, boom, I would just pass right out.
Which maybe just means we're tired. Maybe. Right.
That's the simplest
Yeah.
answer to that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Or we can't count high enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I think it can be very powerful for many people. So whatever your thing is, I think that's it, right? You've got to figure out what your thing is. You and I were talking before we hit the record button. For me, one of my meditations is baseball, like sitting and watching a game or even having a game in the background while I'm doing other things. That's like my meditation. Like that's normalcy. That's, paying attention to something that I love, that even in this pandemic, although it was certainly delivered in a different way, felt normal. And so I think you just got to know yourself well enough to give yourself whatever gift you need to get through the day and stay strong.
I'm so delighted that you said that baseball was meditation because, and this makes up for you being a Dodgers fan because I'm a Rays fan. Um, I was talking to my business partner. It's like, hey, you gonna watch the World Series Rays game and all that? And he's like, no, no, and he doesn't like baseball. And I said, it's like, well, I find it meditative. It's just, it's got this beauty and this sway and this just art to it. And he said no. He's like, that's golf, and I don't watch golf either. So
Yeah, well, first of all, you probably need a new partner if he doesn't like baseball. That should be your question. Yeah, that should be your first question as you look for a new partner. Do you like baseball? Because it's sort of like people who don't like dogs. I just don't trust them, right?
dude, I
Uh,
know, dude. I'm the same
yeah,
way, man. That's
yeah.
awesome.
And for me, baseball is what I love about it is there's people, it's so layered. And
Mhm.
it's really about strategy. In some ways, it's a lot about our business. It's both basic blocking and tackling, but it's also a really smart strategy underneath. And I love the rhythm of the game and all of that. And so, yeah, I find it very calming, oddly.
Yeah, and there's a perspective and a long-term outlook to the next game and what's going
Mm-hmm.
to happen based on
Mm-hmm.
who you're going to have pitching, fielding, hitting.
Yeah.
Just I love all that. It's very similar to business.
Yeah, it really is. And I think it's a way to think about something different, but use our brain in the same way we do on a day-to-day basis.
So, where do you think, like a couple more questions, where do you think most agencies are going wrong today? Like, if you had to give a tip, what would you like, guys? I can't believe, and gals, you're not doing fill in that blank.
Yeah. So I think the first thing, and this goes back to what we talked about in the very beginning of the interview. I think the first mistake that many agency owners make is that they do not understand the financial metrics that are very agency specific, and they don't run their business by them. One of the reasons why most AMI agencies are having a good year, despite that it's 2020, is because AMI has pounded into their head financial metrics and best practices that they live and breathe by. And so that allowed them to make really smart decisions all along the way that really protected their business. So number one, you got to understand how to run your business by the numbers. And the biggest mistake most agencies make is they're overstaffed. And you don't know that if you don't understand your numbers. Number two, I think most agencies rely on I'm going to throw the net out and whatever referrals or my network brings in, whatever the net catches that day, we're going to eat. Some days it's a beautiful salmon and other days it's a boot. And that is not the right way to run your business in the long run. You really do need to have a business development strategy that is consistent like clockwork over time. And whether you want to believe in the authority thing or the niche thing, that's certainly my belief, and based on my almost 30 years of agency experience, what I believe is the right way to go. And I certainly think it's reflective of how consumers buy everything today. The reality is we buy everything without the vendor knowing we're ready to buy. We're 80% of the way through the buying decision before the vendor even knows we're looking at them. And that's true for agency services as well. But whether you want to do that or not, you got to have something in place that is telling the world who you are and how smart you are and how you can help them on a regular basis. Otherwise, your every agency goes through ebbs and flows, but you can sure even that out to a great extent with a consistent biz dev program.
Perfect. And what are some of the top resources you would recommend for our audience and our listeners?
Well, I mean, at AMI, there are a lot of free resources. We've got a podcast called Build a Better Agency that has been around for over 5 years. So there's lots of episodes there to listen to. We have a lot of free content that's out there. We also, if you want to learn all of those financial metrics and learn all of that, we've got workshops for agency owners and kind of their CFOs or accountant types. That is 2 days of all we do is talk about money and everything from the financial metrics to pricing and proposals to tax strategies. So there's lots of places where you can learn everything that you need to know, but you have to seek the information out. So, we have peer groups where agency owners come together and share their best practices with each other. So depending on the depth of involvement you want, from free to ongoing engagement, I think we probably have something for just about everybody.
Right on. And then if I were to give you this space where you could plug anything that you wanted to plug, or if you wanted to peddle something, feel free to push it, my friend.
You know what? Here's what I would say. Head over to agencymanagementinstitute.com and just look under the How We Help navigation. And you're going to find a bunch of free resources. You're going to find information about our workshops. You're going to find information about our memberships. You can buy the book there. My whole goal is you can download every executive summary from 2014 on from all the research. So there's a ton of content there that we've built specifically to help you run your business better. And you know yourself well enough to know, what, I'm a joiner. I want to join a peer group, or what, I don't want Drew to ever know that I'm out there. So I'm just going to listen to his podcast and maybe I'll read his book. Whatever level of involvement you want to have as an agency owner, we've got something there for you. And a lot of it is free. So I hope you take full advantage of it and take as much of the free resource as you can, because that's why it's there.
So whether you're a joiner or a lurker,
right.
AMI has something for you.
Yeah, right. I don't ever have to know you're there. Or you know what? You can have my cell phone number and we can be texting on a regular basis, whatever level of involvement you want to have.
Right. As long as you're a Tigger, not an Eeyore.
Well, if you're an Eeyore, I'll take you, but I only one of you a day. Yeah.
Perfect. Drew, thank you so much, man. This was great. Really appreciate your time.
You bet. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.